Meet Dr. Diane Ginsburg, a board-certified OBGYN who was previously ranked number 4 in the Rejuvenation Olympics, meaning she had a slower pace of aging than the likes of Brian Johnson. She's a longevity-focused athlete who's doing marathons, Spartan races, and ninja gym workouts, all at the age of 60. Want to know how she does it? Then stick around to hear about her longevity routine, including her secret weapon, young plasma infusion.
I actually have not great genetics. I have a huge predisposition to oxidative stress with very, very poor recovery. I have terrible, terrible collagen synthesis, and I have terrible bone building. So those are my three bad gene pathways. What I did personally is I'm 60, like I said. I did not wait. I went immediately as I started to get into the mid perimenopausal, late perimenopausal age range. I went on hormone replacement. And I went on what I like to use called therapeutic hormone replacement. For a long time, hormones for women were, okay, stick a patch on and hope that you don't have hot flashes. I use the Rhine 24-hour urine test. I run my hormones at the level of somebody in the late 40s. I don't believe in super physiologic levels. I don't do pellets. I don't think a woman should run a testosterone of 250. I think that'll give you weight problems in the long run, but I think that women tend to wait too long to start hormones. So I started progesterone in my late 40s, and then I added an estrogen in my 50s, and I make a decent amount of testosterone, so I don't take that. When I've tried it, I actually get acne. So I think it's also probably quite a bit overrated. I think if you lift and you run and you exercise appropriately and you take estrogen and progesterone, your body will do a pretty good job with that. So I take bioidentical estrogen, estradiol, estriol at a pretty good level, like I said, where I run my 24-hour urine levels at the level of the late 40s. Same thing with my progesterone. I'm a pretty avid athlete. And I think that it is very true, and I know that it's talked about all the time about how important exercise is. I exercise a lot. I exercise probably 6 days a week. I would do 7, but I'm a marathon runner, plus I'm a Spartan racer, plus I train in the ninja gym. So if I didn't take Fridays off, I would never recover, but I'd probably do about 2.5 hours of exercise a day. I lift 5 days a week, and I probably run or swim or aqua jog 6 days a week. So I split the lifting and the cardio, which I think is really, really significant. And if you get estrogen levels to a level that is reasonable, especially in a woman, what I think happens is you increase blood flow. Number one thing, right, that goes in aging is blood flow, vascularity. If you do that and then you exercise, you lift and you run, you keep the microvascularity going. And I think that's what keeps the cells healthy, which enables the turnover to be significant. So I do that. I prioritize sleep. I couldn't when I was an OBGYN. So now I stopped delivering babies in 2019. So now I try to sleep 8 hours a night and have no problem with that. I go to bed at a reasonable hour, usually by 9:30, and I'm up at 5 exercising. And I don't take a ton of supplements. I take omega D probiotic. I do a little extra protein powder, and I take Orthomolecular makes a product called Mitocore. It's a really good antioxidant multivitamin. So I take that, and I do 5 grams of creatine a day. Okay. And the only thing that's probably above and beyond that is I do young plasma infusions once or twice a year. I usually do a liter a month. I do better personally rather than a big load of it. Some people can tolerate a lot of it, like 2 liters at a time. I don't do as well with that. I feel better with spreading it out. So I usually do every January, February, March, I do a liter. And then sometimes I'll do a touch-up sometime in the middle of the year. So it sort of puts growth factors on top of everything else that I'm doing. And I think that's what's helped keep everything pretty healthy.
Thanks for the overview. What about for your diet? Anything particular? Do you do any intermittent fasting?
I don't. I honestly, I think as a woman, right, you need protein in the morning. I mean, I think the literature, even men, is pretty clear that you got to put protein in the morning. I just eat clean. I don't drink at all. I stopped. I would drink a glass of wine here and there. I stopped drinking completely 6 months ago, and I feel way better. Do I think a glass of wine here and there is a problem? No. I think that intermittent fasting, the problem you run into with that is that if you get up in the morning, you need to put protein in the system, right? I learned from Dr. Andy Galpin, who I follow him on YouTube, right, that you can't store protein. So therefore, if you wake up in the morning and it's not there and then you go to the gym, you're in a lot of trouble. So I try to have it available. So I'll eat in the morning, and then I eat clean. I don't eat gluten. I don't eat dairy. I mean, I follow probably a pretty paleo lifestyle. Everybody says that's restrictive. I don't have a problem with it. You can eat as many potatoes as you want, and butternut squash. So I try to get my carbohydrates from root vegetables. I eat meat, fish, vary as much as I can. I try to do as many weird vegetables as I can. I shop with my cell phone, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. I look it up and they're like, okay, just throw it in the oven. So I try to vary that as much as possible to help keep a healthy microbiome. And I'll do gluten-free cookie once in a while. Like, I just don't eat a lot of sugar. I eat a little bit of Purely Elizabeth granola before a long run because I love to distance run. I'm training for another marathon. I need to put a little carbohydrate in. So I may do a little bit of gluten-free granola with a little protein before I run. But that's it. I just eat clean, a lot of vegetation, but I eat meat and I eat fish. I just follow what my body wants. If I feel like you need a little more protein, then I eat it. If I feel like I need more vegetables that day, I eat it. And I think it's hard to then say, oh, I'm not going to eat after 4 o'clock, like to get that intermittent fasting window. So I just follow the logic of don't eat too close to bedtime. But the thing you find, and I hope everybody understands this, like I'll work out in the morning and then I see patients all day. And then sometimes I finish at 6 o'clock with patients and then I'll go for a run. Well, then I need to eat, but then I need to go to bed. So I don't want to have a panic attack. Oh my God, I got to intermittent fast. And, if I finish and I'm eating at 7:30, 8 o'clock, but then I went to bed at 9 and I didn't get food in for, oh my God, I ate too close to bedtime. I think you just don't want to make yourself crazy. I think the key is to just kind of eat what feels good, keep it clean, and build your exercise and a couple of your supplements around it. And if you're a woman, take hormones.
Okay. And can you touch on testing? What kind of testing do you do for your longevity? Blood tests, measure your blood glucose levels?
So really interesting. So I did a glucose monitor once, and I was in the middle of kind of healing from an injury. So I was doing a lot of aqua jogging, and I found out the hard way that it doesn't stay on that well when you spend a lot of time in the pool. Yeah. So I did 5 days of that, and I found that, certain foods like sweet potatoes spiked my sugar, and grains didn't do it as bad. I don't know if I learned a ton from that. Some people really like that. So I run a little higher fasting glucose in the morning, but I think that's my metabolic state with the exercise that I do. So I literally have done one glucose monitor for 5 days. I wear a Garmin, probably because I'm an athlete, so it always makes me feel better to have the Garmin on. I wore it a bunch of times to sleep, and it started to make me a little bit crazy at night. I would wake up in the morning, and I would be like, oh my God, I thought I had a good night's sleep, and the watch only read, 90%. So do I think it's good here and there to wear a Whoop or wear a Garmin to get an idea that you're maybe doing okay? But I read Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. And I think it's a great read. It's 2014, but I think it's a great read. And I think if you sort of follow that as best as possible, you get into bed about 10, 15 minutes before you're going to go to sleep. And I read a book and, you don't have bright lights in the room. I don't even know that you need to kind of make yourself so hung up on that. As a physician, as an MD, I follow labs, but you really have to be careful because I don't think, and we were talking about some of this, I don't know that there's basic LabCorp Quest labs that are going to teach you a ton about your longevity. I think you can micro try to pick that apart. Oh, I need my liver function test below 20, or I need my red cell distribution with low. But I think in general, if you run a good C-reactive protein and you run a good homocysteine, like if you run just generally healthy LabCorp numbers, I don't know that that's going to give you any major markers towards longevity. All it's going to let you know, I think, is that you're healthy at the moment and what you're doing is working. I found a lot of disconnect between the true age testing and my practical numbers. Like I have a glomerular filtration rate of 67, which is low. I have a normal creatinine, but then I have a kidney age in the omic part of the true diagnostic of being 50 or 52. So I don't know how much correlation that really has. And like when people go to their primary care doc, right? They run a CBC, a chemistry, maybe the thyroid. I don't even know if they run a homocysteine. But I think any of the real aging parameters that I've researched, and like clotho or any of those proteins, they become very, very expensive. And I think you can make yourself bankrupt. Even function, when I looked at that, and I have all the respect in the world for Mark Hyman, and function does, I don't know, 500 markers. 85% of them are the ones you just basically get in LabCorp. And you have to be very careful because, especially in a woman, when you measure the female hormones and the brain ovary connection, the FSH, you really have to have a big understanding of the clinical picture behind that before you make any decision of what it means. And I just haven't seen even any markers in that makes a big difference in telling you where you are in your longevity journey.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think, like we discussed, a lot of these clocks are in their infancy, and they are expensive. And you can argue which have the most utility. These different longevity enthusiasts are using multiple clocks. And then again, you go back to like, how useful is that? What are they really telling us? But I think there is utility there. And I think eventually, with time, we're going to figure out, especially with possibly the help of AI, we're going to figure out which clocks or clock is ideal and best represents, your health span and your lifespan.
But I think you have to take into account your exposome or your environment when you also do your clock. And
yeah.
Like I said, for example, when you hang the plasma in, you turn the body upside down. You create methylation changes. You create an inflammatory change. And one of the things, and I told you I was thinking of writing a case report on it. So my dad got his plasma at 80, his first set of plasma, and everything got better, including his golf swing. Like his handicap went down. So he felt stronger. His sleep was better. His grip is good. He's got a little widening of the aorta. That got a little bit better. His BNP marker went down because he's got a little bit of AFib. So all that got better, but his risk to death went from like 40% to 99% in 4 months. So you get all this improvement. And meanwhile, thank God he's alive and well today, and it's 2 years later. So I think there has to be way more taken into account of what affects methylation before those clocks are going to mean anything. Because I think there was a paper out sometime last year that said that your methylation or your biological age will change within 5 years in a single day. So if you, in the middle of the day, do your methylation or do your true age, it may be different than if you do it in the morning. And what happens if I go for a 10-mile run and then I do my age, right?
Yeah.
How much is that going to change? So I think that there really needs to be a deeper dive into exposome that is really going to affect that before you're using that as a real marker.
Yeah, I think the margins of error are still large, but we are getting down that path of exposome and looking at the metabolome, for instance. So those companies are coming out. So I think that's interesting to see what's going to happen in the next few years. But last thing I want to touch upon in terms of your personal approach is you do a lot of exercise. You mentioned 6 days a week. That's a lot. What do you use to gauge, whether you've passed the point of, too much is going to be obviously detrimental. So do you look at HRV? Do you look at your resting heart rate? And how do you gauge, when exercise is, again, too much for you and when you need it?
For me, it's injury, which is bad, but that's what I do, and my running pace. My HRV is pretty good. I mean, as you can imagine, it's pretty good. My resting pulse is good. I think it's about 42, 44, something like that, 47. But I'm probably, when you're a distance runner, it's tough because you got to lift and then you got to sprint. And then when you got a race coming up, you got to run distance. So for the average exerciser, there might be some middle of the road parameters that you can follow, but if you're training, like I'm looking to go back to Boston, so I have a marathon in 2 months. I'm doing light at the end of the tunnel in Washington. So I've got to get the distance done on the weekends, but at 60, I have to lift during the week. If I don't build muscle, I'll be hurt. So I probably use injury. I can tell something gets sore, I back off, I try to rehab it, and then I strengthen it again.
Are you looking at using any other markers or any other types of assessments to gauge versus just injury?
I don't know what else is really going to be significant. I mean, I guess the big thing again you could say is your heart rate variability is going to go up, but it's so varied then by how busy my patient schedule is, or if there's a push, like, you're trying to get a paper in. So I think the hard part of that, and I find this is that, and I see it with my patients, they'll turn around and say to me, well, I'm doing this and I got this issue with my kid and I got to get him off to college, and then we're selling our house and then I just don't have time to go to the gym. Like, I think it's really easy. It's the first thing that falls off in people. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. Tim Ferriss had a really interesting PhD on muscle strength on, and he was talking about a lot of different things and how peptides, the BP 157, he said it doesn't really do anything, right? It helps increase receptors of growth hormone, but that's not really going to help your muscle. It was a very interesting podcast. But his comment was the best thing you can do is kind of some isometric muscle strength, but it's easier to tell somebody, oh, get an injection of this, or try this food, or do this other stuff, than it is to say, hey, go spend an hour in the gym. So it's always going to be hard if you're going to do that, and you're going to try to be a parent, which I've got 2 kids. And I'm still, I think, a good parent. I try to still spend time with them, even though they're 26 and 30. But I think it's hard to do that and write a paper, and for me, see patients full time. So
Right.
I don't know what the magic answer to that. Do I recommend people to go to injury? No. But I think there's so many things that are going to affect the outside world, and I just don't know what to really depend on that is going to be the most accurate thing to say, okay, don't run today or lift a little bit more. I don't even know that anybody can tell me what would be the perfect thing to use.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. That's just the state we are in right now. And the last thing I want to touch on actually is what I call the scope approach. It's a bunch of different things, but S for stress relief, C is for community, O is for optimism, P is for purpose, and E is for energy, youthful energy, believing that you're young. Do you use any of those approaches to your longevity routine?
Probably the biggest thing I use is grateful. Probably for me, and I know that sounds trite, but I do about a minute grateful prayer every morning. I'm grateful for the breath in my lungs and the roof over my head. I live my life that way. I saw something the other day where a guy did a 24-hour treadmill run, and he's like, I'm running because I can. The concept that when I'm really stressed seeing patients, I'm like, but there are people that can't get out of a hospital bed. When I'm running my marathon, you turn it around and you look at people on the side, and you'll see somebody's walking with a cane, or somebody's, in a wheelchair. They can't. So I live my life very grateful for what I have and what I can do. The lady that runs my aquajog, her name is Jennifer Conroy, and she does an aquajog online program. And she said breathlessness is a privilege. And I love that. And I try to live that every day. So
That's great.
if you are stressed enough, or you are running enough, or you are doing something enough that you are climbing, whether it's in your business or in your research or in your job, that you can be either physically or intellectually breathless, you're in a good place.
To see more routines that are successfully slowing aging, check out these videos.